Good day, and welcome to Psychological Health and Safety Virtual Learning Series that took place this year from January the 27th to the 31st of 2025. So, psychological hazards, they are in every workplace in the province. They might look different and present themselves in various ways, but you can be rest assured that they are there. So, we're talking about mental health more and more because of the link between our physical health and our mental health. As the World Health Organization told us back in 1979, there is no health without mental health. Never has the case for mental health awareness and promotion of good mental health in the workplace been so important in the history of occupational health and safety. So 988 is Canada's suicide crisis helpline. You can call or you can text 24 hours a day, every day of the year for a safe space to talk. So, welcome today to Psychosocial Hazards and Stress Connecting the Dots. My name is Deanne Feltham Scott. I'm an OSH educational consultant in prevention services. This session was originally delivered on January the 30th, 2025. So today we're going to cover psychological health, the definition of psychological or mental health. We're also going to talk about stress, a little bit of a comparison or the difference between acute and chronic stress, how stress affects the body, what causes it, some common psychosocial hazards that are in all workplaces, as well as some general controls for workplaces and organizations to put in place to reduce the risk of psychological or psychosocial harm. So, workplaces that are healthy and safe can reduce the risk of harm from stressful work conditions that affects all employees' psychological health. And we know that all employees have a role to play in creating and maintaining a psychologically safe work environment. As workers, we all have the responsibility to work safely by reporting any psychological hazards to our employers, as well as following safe work practices and procedures that have been put in place for us to follow. So, in order for workers to maintain this psychologically safe workplace, employers are responsible to create psychologically safe workplaces that reduce the risk of harm from stressful work conditions, which can affect the psychological or mental health of workers by first identifying what those hazards are, as well as managing them or putting some controls in place to for workers to follow in order to reduce the risk of psychological harm. So, a key factor, of course, is creating a culture of psychological safety where employees feel comfortable speaking up about their mental health concerns without fear of stigma or retaliation. What this means is that as organizations, we have to promote open communication. We have to actively listen to employee feedback, as well as take steps to address these concerns that are brought to us. So let's start with defining what is psychological or mental health. There's certainly terms that are appropriate to use interchangeably. So the World Health Organization, they define mental health as a state of well-being that includes our emotional, our psychological, as well as our social well-being. Mental health is powerful and it directly impacts our thoughts, our feelings, as well as our actions. It also influences how we handle stress, how we behave in relationships, make day-to-day decisions and choices. Positive mental health allows us to handle the stressors in our daily lives and be able to make healthy decisions. It's also key to support us and our performance at work. And when we have poor mental health, it can certainly make our life a little more challenging, and it can harm our work performance, our productivity, how engaged we are in work, and the contributions that we can make at work. So it's important to remember as well that we all have mental health. Just like we have physical health, we have mental health. So 1 in 3 of us, we will have a mental health condition at some point during our lives. As employers, as workers, we have that shared responsibility for maintaining and improving our health, our safety, as well as our well-being at work. While as individuals in the workplace, we are responsible for our own mental well-being, employers are required to do no harm to our psychological health while we are at work. So let's start by just generally defining what stress is. There's many definitions out there, but for the purposes of today's webinar, we're just going to define it as any type of change in our lives that requires us to make immediate adjustments or bring immediate attention to that situation. And it can cause physical, emotional, or psychological responses in us. Stress, as we know it, it's a normal part of life. We can experience it from our environment, our physical body, as well as our thoughts and our emotions. And even positive life changes, such as, a new job, the birth or adoption of a child, purchasing a new house. Of course, these are the good things that happen to us in our life, but they do bring with them a certain level of stress. So generally speaking, there's 2 kinds of stress. There's acute stress, which is short term, and then we have chronic stress, which is more long term. Chronic stress comes from repeated exposure to situations that produce stressful reactions in our bodies. So examples of acute stress would be anything that you experience for a short period of time. Like, for example, a traffic jam while you're running late for work, an argument with somebody that's important to you, somebody at home, somebody in your workplace, or negative feedback from your manager or your supervisor. So those are some examples of acute stress, okay? But let's say that you're covering for a sick colleague in addition to having your own work. You have a difficult relationship with your manager or your colleagues, or you have a family member who's chronically ill and needs a little more support than what they've needed in the past. These are all examples of acute stress that can turn into chronic stress if we don't have the tools in our toolbox to help us manage the reaction to those situations. So our body, let's just look at how our body is affected by stress. So our body is really good at handling those episodes of acute stress. We're designed to recover quickly from short-term stress. And physiologically, we all respond to stress in the same way. So what happens is that when we encounter a situation that's posing some stress for us, the nervous system kind of wakens up. Hormones are released in our body that sharpens our senses, our pulse begins to quicken, our breathing gets a little more shallow and quick, and our muscles can also tense up. So, this is called the fight, flight, or freeze response. And from an evolutionary perspective, this response helps us to defend ourselves as well as respond to anything that we encounter in our environment that we interpret as a as a threat. So, this type of stress, because we were made to respond, to react, to get ourselves out of danger, this poses little risk to our bodies. But, key point, this type of stress is temporary and it should be temporary. So, once we've passed that fight, flight, or freeze response moment, our heart rate, our breathing, it should slow down. Our muscles should start to relax a little bit, and our body should return to its natural resting state without any of those lasting negative effects. But our body is not so good at handling that long-term chronic stress and the constant activation of all of those body systems. So, over time, what chronic stress does is that it gradually increases our resting heart rate, our blood pressure, our breathing rate, and our levels of overall muscle tension. So now what happens is that the body has to work even harder when it's at rest to keep you functioning at your new normal. So, in other words, chronic stress creates a new normal that's inside your body, and we're constantly having to adapt to that new normal. So, common effects of stress on the body, um, as well as our physical health, include headaches, muscle tension or pain, chest pains, fatigue and insomnia, muscle tension or overall body pain, stomach and digestive issues. As we just talked about, the increase in heart rate, blood pressure, as well as high blood sugar and cholesterol. So, how does chronic stress affect the body? Every body system is affected by stress. Our nervous system, our musculoskeletal, respiratory, cardiovascular, endocrine, gastrointestinal, reproductive. Every body system is affected by stress. So, I'm going to show you a very informative and excellent video on how stress makes you sick.
Cramming for a test? Trying to get more done than you have time to do? Stress is a feeling we all experience when we are challenged or overwhelmed. But more than just an emotion, stress is a hardwired physical response that travels throughout your entire body. In the short term, stress can be advantageous, but when activated too often or too long, your primitive fight or flight stress response not only changes your brain, but also damages many of the other organs and cells throughout your body. Your adrenal gland releases the stress hormones cortisol, epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, and norepinephrine. As these hormones travel through your bloodstream, they easily reach your blood vessels and heart. Adrenaline causes your heart to beat faster and raises your blood pressure, over time causing hypertension. Cortisol can also cause the endothelium, or inner lining of blood vessels, to not function normally. Scientists now know that this is an early step in triggering the process of atherosclerosis, or cholesterol plaque buildup in your arteries. Together, these changes increase your chances of a heart attack or stroke. When your brain senses stress, it activates your autonomic nervous system. Through this network of nerve connections, your big brain communicates stress to your enteric or intestinal nervous system. Besides causing butterflies in your stomach, this brain-gut connection can disturb the natural rhythmic contractions that move food through your gut, leading to irritable bowel syndrome, and can increase your gut's sensitivity to acid, making you more likely to feel heartburn. Via the gut's nervous system, stress can also change the composition and function of your gut bacteria, which may affect your digestive and overall health. Speaking of digestion, does chronic stress affect your waistline? Well, yes. Cortisol can increase your appetite. It tells your body to replenish your energy stores with energy-dense foods and carbs, causing you to crave comfort foods. High levels of cortisol can also cause you to put on those extra calories as visceral or deep belly fat. This type of fat doesn't just make it harder to button your pants. It is an organ that actively releases hormones and immune system chemicals called cytokines that can increase your risk of developing chronic diseases such as heart disease and insulin resistance. Meanwhile, stress hormones affect immune cells in a variety of ways. Initially, they help prepare to fight invaders and heal after injury. But chronic stress can dampen the function of some immune cells, make you more susceptible to infections, and slow the rate you heal. Want to live a long life? You may have to curb your chronic stress. That's because it has even been associated with shortened telomeres, the shoelace tip ends of chromosomes that measure a cell's age. Telomeres cap chromosomes to allow DNA to get copied every time a cell divides without damaging the cell's genetic code, and they shorten with each cell division. When telomeres become too short, a cell can no longer divide, and it dies. As if all that weren't enough, chronic stress has even more ways it can sabotage your health, including acne, hair loss, sexual dysfunction, headaches, muscle tension, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, and irritability. So, what does all this mean for you? Your life will always be filled with stressful situations, but what matters to your brain and entire body is how you respond to that stress. If you can view those situations as challenges you can control and master, rather than as threats that are insurmountable, you will perform better in the short run and stay healthy in the long run.
So, just an excellent video on how the stress affects all of the body systems. So, what causes stress? We just found out, how, I guess, stress affects the body. So, what is it that actually causes stress? So, there are some individual and personal factors that are involved: our genetics, our upbringing, our attitudes, our perceptions of situations, our personality, and as well as how you respond to situations, right? So that's the individual personal factors of of stressors, I guess, in our lives. So the second one is why we're here today, is to talk about the workplace factors, or the work environment. And the work environment is one of the many settings that can have an impact on our psychological health. As a average Canadian, I guess, we spend about 30 to 40 hours per week at work. Some of us more. Some of us spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our families. So it is important that we maintain a psychologically healthy and safe workplace. Back in 2013, the Mental Health Commission of Canada, they found that 500,000 Canadians, so that is the population of the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, are not able to go to work every week due to a psychological health issue. So this definitely is eye-opening, and keeping in mind as well that this is before COVID, and we know that many people's mental health was impacted during the pandemic and is still being affected. So we could probably expect a little more than that right now. So what are the sources of stress? There's various sources. So let's just start with finances, extracurricular activities, anything that you're involved in your community, outside work, outside your family, life events, of course, not just the negative life events, the loss of a good friend, the death of a loved one, loss of a job. We talked a little bit about the positive things that happen in our life as well that can be stressful. Work, absolutely. Work has been found as one of the major contributors to stress in Canadians. Family, so this could be our direct family, our immediate family, I guess, as well as our extended family, friends that are like family. Our physical health, as well as our mental health, can certainly cause some stress for us. Some of us have been in a situation where we have experienced a traumatic event. This is I guess, a special type of stress, but exposure to a traumatic event can definitely be a stressor for us. So, stress is an issue for working Canadians. In April of 2023, information on mental health and work related stress was collected by Labour Canada for workers that are between the ages of 15 and 69. And this was part of a Labour Force Survey series. So what they found is that 60% of Canadians experience work-related stress. The top three reasons being heavy workloads, work-life balance, as well as job stability. 21% reported that they have high or very high levels of stress. And 3 in 5 employees reported that their mental health had declined in 2023 because of workplace stress. So now that we know that stress has an impact in many workplaces in Canada, let's just look at a common scenario. So here are two employees with the same expectation to get through more work than is physically possible to accomplish in one day. So Nicole, she's helped by her manager to prioritize what is most important, and she's assured that she's assured by her manager that they understand that everything can't be accomplished in one day, and that the expectation is to do the best that they can during their working hours. But Pavin is told that if they don't get all the work done, there's a risk of failing at the project, losing a client, or even risk losing their job. So if the hours worked and the capability of both employees is the same, who do you believe would be more productive in the long run? Who do you think would be more likely to complain about workplace stress? And of course, you would expect that Pavin, who doesn't have the support of his manager, would be less productive and more prone to workplace stress. And we know as well that chronic stress can lead to burnout. So, in the example that we just looked at, Pavin, if exposed to these types of situations for long term and on a continuous basis, is definitely more at risk for burnout. Burnout is caused by chronic workplace stress. And when you have these high stress situations that build up and you don't get a break from any of it, then you're putting yourself at risk of burnout. So, burnout is considered by the World Health Organization as an occupational phenomenon. It's not classified as a medical condition. They define it as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It's characterized by feelings of energy depletion or just being exhausted, increased mental distance from one's job, feelings of negativity or cynicism related to the person's job, as well as reduced professional efficacy. So, what are the symptoms of burnout? Well, some people may experience the following physical and mental symptoms. And it's also important to remember as well that just because you have these symptoms doesn't mean that you're experiencing burnout, okay? Just want to make you aware of some physical as well as mental symptoms. You really need to have those four criteria: the feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance, negativity, and feelings of reduced professional ability. You need to have these four criteria in addition to the physical and mental symptoms. What you really need to do is you need to consult with a healthcare professional for diagnosis as well as appropriate care. So, some physical symptoms that you might experience: headaches, stomach issues, fatigue, high blood pressure, and increased illnesses. These would be physical illnesses. Getting colds, getting flus, picking up all of the viruses and the bugs that are going around. Mentally and emotionally, you may experience anxiety, depression, loss of feelings of pleasure, feeling worthless, and your concentration and your focus would be impacted as well. So, how do we move forward in protecting workers from burnout? So, what we've been typically doing is only treating the symptoms, right? We're really focusing on the individual who's experiencing those physical and mental systems and look at how we can change how they behave and how they react in the workplace. What this does is we're putting the sole responsibility of stress management and burnout prevention on the workers themselves, and thinking that if we can fix the person, if we can fix the symptoms, then we can fix the issue. So, what really is happening is that we're using short term solutions, hoping that they're going to fix long term problems. But we know that this approach typically doesn't work and the issues will only get worse, right? So we're treating the physical symptoms, we're treating the mental symptoms, and we're treating the organizational symptoms, reducing work hours, conflict resolution, resilience training, time management, overtime, increasing the leave, errors and mistakes, employee turnover, unnecessary training. So we're treating all of these symptoms, right? We're giving workers more training. We're perhaps giving them more opportunities to avail of leave, which gives them a break away from the work. But what we really need to do is we really need to focus on changing the stressors itself. So it's not that individual coping is not important, because we will discuss this further in the webinar, but if we see that as the solution, we're actually blaming the workers and not actually changing the stressors themselves. So we really need to look at the structure of the workplace, the relationships, the daily interactions that we're having with people, as opposed to, for instance, treating people. Conflict resolution. Really, really important. But if we're engaging in conflict resolution consistently, then it's more important that we look at teaching people how to effectively communicate and putting an effective communication plan in place. We need to look at the design of work and the environment to improve the workloads. A schedule that works for the person and the work is being done, and the ways that workers can have autonomy as well as control. So now we're going to just look at some common psychosocial hazards, and keep in mind that the rest of this webinar is very general. As an organization, as an employer, it's important that you conduct a risk assessment to find the psychological hazards that are in your workplace, assess them for the risk of psychological harm, and put specific controls in place that's going to reduce that risk of psychological harm to the workers. This list of examples and hazards coming up are not exhaustive. It's just a list of common psychosocial hazards. So number one is high or low job demands. These jobs typically pose the most stress for workers, as was found in the study that was conducted by the Mental Health Commission of Canada. So what do these jobs look like? Task beyond the worker's level of competence or capacity. So they just don't have the skills that they need in order to do this job. Being pressured to complete work outside of work hours. Lack of resources required to complete the task. So you've been assigned something, but you actually don't have the resources that you need in order to successfully complete them. Absence of team members due to illness or leave, or sometimes too, not having enough to do is can cause a certain level of stress. When you're sitting, at your desk or you're in your job and you really don't have a lot to do, it can certainly pose some stress for you. Jobs that have low job control. So what does this look like? Well, workers are not involved in decisions that affect them or their clients. Very policy, very procedure driven, with very little consultation with the workers in what those policies and procedures look like for them, and of course for their clients or customers. Work that's tightly managed as well as timed. Lack of opportunities to learn and develop new skills. Little say in the work that is being done. So going back to that first bullet point, lack of consultation, lack of reaching out and communicating to workers to find out what is the best way for them to do their job. Excessive monitoring as well as scrutiny of low-level tasks. So really the micromanagement of your job. Poor support. What does poor support look like? Workers who work in isolation or on geographically dispersed teams. Where supervisors and managers are leading large numbers of workers, and it's difficult for them to provide adequate support to each other. When there's inadequate opportunity within work hours to speak with colleagues or as well as managers. Everybody is just so busy that there's just no time to reach out and problem solve together. Inadequate training as well as tools and resources for a particular task. Low role clarity. What does this look like? being asked to do a task with no instructions, really no support, no direction. Just go ahead and do it kind of thing. And a lack of clarity about the task itself, the priority of the task, as well as timelines and deadlines. Changing responsibilities without consultation, and allocating the same task to two different workers, which results in duplication of effort as well as frustration and confusion amongst the staff. Workers who have multiple supervisors as well, and have competing demands, it's best that you just have one worker reporting to one supervisor, not put another one in the mix. Poor change management. What does this look like? Disorganized, unplanned change in the workplace. No one is notified of what the changes will be. It just happens. There's no communication. There's no consultation or engagement with the staff. Just an overall failure to communicate key messages, updates, or reasons for the change itself. And lack of reward and recognition. So, lack of positive feedback about work performance, how valued you are in the organization, how your work is contributing to the overall success of the organization. No process for regular performance discussions, planning, and goal setting in consultation with workers. Little opportunity to grow and develop skills and competencies, as well as underused skills. So someone has a great skill set, but they are not being asked to use that skill set. So how do we control these hazards? So, generally speaking, time pressure and role overload. Design manageable workloads, especially during peaks of peak demand. Many times organizations know when they are going to have peak production or peak performance. So design that with a manageable work schedule so that not just one person or one group of people are getting bombarded with the job task. Rotate tasks that are time pressured or excessively physically as well as mentally demanding for the workers. Provide workers with enough time, resources, and equipment to perform the tasks that have been assigned to them. And make sure that you schedule your work too so workers have adequate time for rest as well as recovery. And implement flexible working arrangement policies and practices. What about controls for poor support? Establish clear reporting and communication lines. Provide employers with those soft skill development that includes both task and emotional support. So, really looking at increasing emotional intelligence in leaders, providing practical solutions for concerns such as backfilling vacant roles, either temporarily, permanently, but looking at ways that you can lessen, I guess, the work that a particular group of people are facing. Establish procedures to support workers that is affected by a negative work event as well. So, what about general controls? Well, we can create procedures and workplace specific policies for any psychosocial hazards that were identified in a risk assessment as being a potential hazard and risk for workers. Ensure that leaders are trained and all levels of management. They're trained about their role in identifying psychosocial hazards and in providing support, particularly if their workers are experiencing demanding, distressing, or traumatic events, or have been exposed to bullying, violence, harassment, make sure that you provide clear expectations for implementing psychosocial safety procedures as well as support, and build the capability of workers by providing education and training that is not just related to mental health, and increasing, I guess, the awareness and the mental health literacy of people, but also educate them on any high risk hazards that were identified as part of the risk assessment. Ensure that there's professional psychological support available to workers who are either directly or indirectly exposed to a traumatic event or some other type of emotionally demanding work. Create an environment in which workers feel comfortable to raise concerns. Make sure that you have a process for workers to report any psychosocial hazards that they have encountered in the workplace, and educate workers as well about about those early warning signs of stress as well as fatigue. So make sure that you have a process as well to manage performance and support workers who are struggling. Be in tune with those symptoms of burnout that you would have to watch. Not just, as a, I guess most especially for a manager, but even as coworkers, we all need to know what the signs of burnout are so we can reach out and perhaps offer some assistance and help to our coworkers who we think might be experiencing burnout. Promote balance and use of leave, support recovery from periods of high demand, and of course, an employee assistance program or an employee family assistance program is a great way to provide short-term support for workers and their family. Just finishing up with another really good video. It's called the stress bucket, actually. So it's going to kind of, start off with reviewing a few of the things that we just covered, but it's also going to finish off with some things that we can all do as individuals, either inside or outside the workplace, to help us manage, to help us identify, as well as manage our own stress.
Stress is something that we all experience sometimes. When problems and pressures get too much, we can start to feel overwhelmed and struggle to cope. Everyday pressures like work, money, and family worries can place huge demands on us, as can big life events like losing your job, family breakdown, or the death of someone close. The stress bucket is a helpful way of thinking about your problems and finding different ways of looking at what's causing your stress. Imagine that you carry a bucket with you. As the day goes by, different problems and demands fill up your bucket. When your bucket overflows, the stress can make you angry, anxious, or sad. The good news is there are things that you can do to manage these problems and stop your bucket overflowing. Try and exercise a bit more, eat well, and get more sleep. Get support by talking to someone you trust and telling them how you feel. Make a list to help break problems down and think about your priorities. What smaller tasks should you tackle first? Try the relaxation ideas on the Mindwell website. Take a short break, practice breathing techniques, and find the things that work for you. Making these small changes can feel good, like turning on a tap to release some of the pressure you're feeling. Explore the Mindwell website for more helpful tools and ideas for coping with stress and keeping your buckets from overflowing.
So, just a really nice overview of what we can all do on a daily basis. And what it all really comes down to, is self care. What do we do on a daily basis to look after our physical as well as our mental health? Getting some good movement, regular exercise, following Canada's food guide for healthy eating, making sure that we're getting the rest that our body needs in order to recover. So, thank you for joining me here today. Just want to give you an overview of everything that we covered today. So, we just defined psychological or mental health. We differentiated between acute and chronic stress. We went over, had a great video on how stress affects the body, what causes stress, the interpersonal factors, as well as our life factors, the workplace factors, some common psychosocial hazards in the workplace, as well as some general controls. So, as I was saying at the beginning of the webinar, this is one of 5 webinars that were delivered this week. All of these webinars, except for neurodiversity in the workplace, is available as a recording. Before I finish up this recording, I just want to bring some attention to our podcast series called The Signal. You can scan that QR code and that will bring you to our YouTube page where 34 podcast episodes have been posted now. This, of course, is part of a regular webinar series that we do, and you can scan that QR code, and that will bring you directly to our website where you can register for some webinars, such as this one today. Also want to bring some attention as well that there is an OSH educational consultant that's available for in-person or virtual presentations in many occupational health and safety topics. All you need to do is reach out to workshops@workplacenl.ca. And thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully you'll take some time to participate in our 3 other psychological health and safety virtual learning series webinars. Have a safe and happy day.